What
June
would you do if the
23rd,
safest place in the
1943,
world suddenly turned into a war
11:47
zone,
p.m.
and no one came to save
outside
you?
Mozdok,
It was
Soviet
supposed to be
Caucasus
just another
front.
weekend retreat for the wealthy.
The night air hung thick
The
and
Pine
warm
Ridge
over the
Resort,
German encampment,
nestled deep in the
carrying
Colorado
with it
mountains,
the distant rumble
was a
of
haven
artillery
for celebrities,
and the acrid
politicians,
smell
and
of
elite
diesel
executives
fuel.
seeking peace and privacy.
Snow capped the pines, champagne flowed endlessly, and the only sounds were laughter and the hum of luxury. No one expected what came next. At precisely 3:17 p.m. on a quiet Friday, the tranquility shattered. A convoy of unmarked black vehicles roared up the icy path. Within minutes, masked gunmen stormed the hotel's main entrance. Security was overwhelmed instantly. Guests screamed as gunshots echoed through the marble halls. Phones were confiscated. Communications were cut. The power grid was hacked. Within 15 minutes, the entire resort was locked down. Children were dragged from their parents. Staff were lined up in the lobby at gunpoint. Anyone who resisted was punished, humiliated in front of everyone. Among the terrified guests was a woman in her late 40s. Her name on the registry was Julia Crawford, just another middle-aged woman from out of town, staying alone in room 308. Her hair was tied back in a simple bun. She wore no makeup, no jewelry. Her presence was unremarkable, almost invisible. The gunmen didn't give her a second look. Neither did the other hostages. But that would prove to be the last mistake they ever made. Julia sat quietly near a broken coffee station, her hands resting calmly in her lap. But her eyes were not afraid. They were calculating, observing, memorizing each detail, each face, each gun. Because what no one knew, not the guests, not the staff, and certainly not the terrorists, was that Julia Crawford wasn't there by accident. She wasn't even Julia Crawford. And this wasn't the first time she had been caught in a siege. It was just the first time they'd taken something from her that she couldn't afford to lose. But the moment they crossed that line, they had no idea who they were dealing with. Julia sat motionless as the world around her crumbled. Men in tactical gear paced the hallways. They barked orders in a language she recognized, not because she studied it, but because she had once been in their world. She had lived among men like them, trained with them, fought worse, but that was a lifetime ago. To these men, she was just another hostage, middle-aged, quiet, forgettable, and she needed them to keep believing that. She glanced at the others. A sobbing hotel manager named Carl Simmons, shaking uncontrollably. A young influencer, Taylor Monroe, filming herself before her phone was ripped away. A retired Senator, Douglas Keene, whose arrogance vanished the moment a rifle was shoved in his face. None of them had a clue that salvation sat 5 feet away, disguised in a pair of hiking boots and a navy blue jacket. The terrorists set up their base of operations in the conference wing. Julia watched through the cracked glass as they unpacked satellite equipment, placed explosive charges near the exits, and organized the hostages into 3 groups. Women and children were separated first. That's when she saw her. A little girl, no older than 8, clutching a stuffed rabbit, trembling as 2 masked men pulled her from her mother's arms. Julia's eyes locked onto hers, and something inside her cracked. Her breath caught, because in that child's terrified face, she saw someone she hadn't seen in years. Her daughter, dead for over a decade. Julia's name wasn't always Julia. 15 years ago, she was Marissa Kane, a covert operative for a classified government unit specializing in hostage rescues and black ops missions. She was one of the best, until a mission in Eastern Europe went sideways. A mole, an ambush. Her entire team was slaughtered and she was declared missing, presumed dead. But she didn't die. She disappeared. After escaping capture, she returned to the US, broken in body and spirit, only to find her husband had moved on. And worse, her 5-year-old daughter had died in a car crash 3 months earlier. The grief was too much, so she buried herself deeper. She erased Marissa Kane. She became Julia Crawford. And now, after all those years, that fire she had extinguished with silence and grief was burning again. That little girl, they'd taken her from her mother and locked her in a supply closet on the 2nd floor. Julia had watched where they dragged her. She memorized the door, the route, the man who stood guard. There were too many to take on alone. She had no weapons, no backup, no allies. But she had something else, something far more dangerous. She had nothing left to lose. And when a woman has nothing left to lose, she becomes the most dangerous force on Earth. By nightfall, the temperature outside dropped below freezing. Inside the grand ballroom, now turned prison, the hostages were cold, hungry, and broken. One by one, they were dragged out, interrogated, beaten, humiliated in front of each other. The leader of the group, who called himself Commander Rafik, paced like a predator. He was calm, charismatic, and terrifyingly intelligent. This wasn't a random act of violence. This was a message to the world, to the government, to anyone who thought they were untouchable. Julia kept her eyes low, her body language weak. She let them think she was afraid. But every insult hurled, every cry she heard, was fuel in her veins. She counted their numbers, she studied their weapons, and she noticed something critical. Rafik trusted only 3 men with his commands. That meant the chain of power was fragile. Break one, the others might scatter. But to strike, she needed access, movement. She needed to escape the ballroom. Her chance came at 2:14 a.m. One of the guards, a young recruit named Victor, was dragging 2 injured staff members down the hallway. He wasn't alert. His weapon hung lazily across his chest. As he passed too close, Julia stumbled forward, coughing violently, falling into him. He shoved her back with his rifle, irritated. That was all she needed. In the brief contact, she slipped a thin keycard from his pocket, an access card, to the maintenance tunnels beneath the hotel. Later that night, while the hostages slept huddled under tablecloths in sheer panic, Julia made her move. Quiet as breath, she slipped through the side hallway, pried open a maintenance panel, and disappeared beneath the floor. The hotel's understructure was vast, a maze of utility rooms, steam pipes, and narrow shafts that only someone with years of field training could navigate. She moved with purpose. Every creak, every whisper of wind told her a story. She reached the supply closet where the little girl was locked away. She picked the lock in seconds. The girl looked up at her with wide, silent eyes. Julia knelt. "I'm not going to let them hurt you," she whispered. "But you have to be brave. Can you do that for me?" The girl nodded. She reminded her so much of her daughter. Same eyes, same quiet strength. Julia took off her jacket and wrapped it around the girl's shoulders. Then she hid her inside a laundry chute that led to the basement, where she had seen a safe corner earlier, near the water tanks. It was a small victory, but it came with a price. As she was making her way back, a beam of flashlight cut through the tunnel. "Stop!" A guard had found her. They fought, brutally. It wasn't clean. It wasn't elegant. It was primal. She took a blow to the ribs. Her shoulder dislocated. But she broke his nose, stole his weapon, and left him unconscious beside a stack of crates. When she returned to the ballroom just before dawn, bruised and bleeding, no one even noticed she had been gone. But Rafik did. And when he discovered one of his men unconscious and the girl missing, he lined up 10 hostages against the wall. Julia couldn't stop it in time. They executed 3. The others wept, broken beyond words. And Julia felt that familiar rage she'd buried years ago rise to the surface. They wanted to make an example. They had no idea what kind of war they'd just declared. Blood still stained the ballroom floor. The silence after the executions was worse than the screams. Even the guards seemed shaken, uneasy, but not Rafik. He stood tall, calm, sipping tea from a porcelain cup as if this were all routine. His voice was smooth when he spoke. "This is only the beginning," he said to the remaining hostages. "Cooperate and you may live. Resist and you will join them." Julia stared at him from the floor. Her lip was split, her left arm nearly useless from the fight in the tunnel. But her mind was razor sharp. They had crossed a line. Now it was her turn. That same night, while the gunmen rotated shifts and fatigue crept in, Julia slipped away again, this time armed. She had hidden the pistol under a loose tile in the bathroom. It wasn't much. 1 gun, 12 bullets, no silencers. But she'd won wars with less. She moved through the hotel like a ghost, barefoot, blood-streaked, silent. She dismantled tripwires, cut power to one of the wings. She broke into the kitchen, poisoned the backup water supply with a sedative she found in the resort spa. One by one, she began dismantling them. The first to go was Basir, a brutal enforcer who had struck a boy across the face for asking to use the bathroom. Julia waited until he was alone in the west stairwell. She ended him without hesitation. Next was Tariq, who had fallen asleep in the control room. She used his radio to feed false orders to the rest of the group, moving them in circles, disorienting them. The hostages didn't know what was happening, but they noticed something changing. The guards began to argue. Their chain of command wobbled. Whispers of sabotage ran through the ranks. By dawn, Julia had already taken out 4 of them. Then, in a bold move, she planted evidence that turned the men against each other: a missing detonator she left in one of their bags, a planted bullet casing beneath another's cot. Rafiq's trust fractured. His control slipped. The hostages began to hope again, but Julia didn't stop there. She returned to the basement, retrieved the little girl, and led her through the utility shafts to a nearby boiler room, where she rigged an emergency flare to trigger the fire alarms. She knew the police had drones circling beyond the tree line, waiting for a visual cue. The flare was a message: "I'm here. The girl is alive." And just before sunrise, as the first rays of light touched the frozen glass, Rafiq discovered the child was gone. His fury exploded, and Julia was ready for him. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was hunting. By 6:02 a.m., the hotel was in chaos. Sirens howled faintly in the distance. Helicopters hovered far enough to observe but not engage. The world was watching now, but inside Pine Ridge, the war had already begun, and Julia was winning. She moved like something out of legend, blending with shadows, appearing where no one expected, always one step ahead. The guards, sleep-deprived and paranoid, began turning on each other. Mistrust poisoned their unity. Some tried to flee. Others begged Rafiq to surrender. He shot one of them in the head in front of the rest. Then he made an announcement on the resort's loudspeaker: "Whoever is doing this, show yourself, or I will execute one hostage every 10 minutes. Julia heard him clearly, from the rooftop. She had made her way up there after retrieving a sniper rifle from a dead operative in the spa corridor. It had 2 bullets left. 2. Enough. She didn't respond to Rafiq's threat. She just waited. Silent, calm, focused. At 6:14 a.m., he stepped out onto the 3rd-floor balcony with a hostage: the senator, Douglas Keene. Rafiq held a pistol to his temple, shouting threats, demands, rage. He dared her to act. She exhaled slowly and pulled the trigger. Rafiq's shoulder exploded in red. The gun flew from his hand. He screamed, stunned, falling backward. Before his men could react, Julia was already inside. She swept through the 2nd floor like a storm. She shot Marek, the last of Rafiq's lieutenants, before he could ignite the backup charges in the dining hall. She disabled the satellite gear in the conference room, ensuring their signal was lost. And then, finally, it was just her and Rafiq. They met in the ruins of the ballroom, once a place of music and celebration, now scorched and soaked in blood. He held a knife. She held nothing, but Julia didn't flinch. Rafiq lunged. She sidestepped, twisted his wrist, disarmed him. The fight was raw, ugly, personal. She took every hit he gave, then gave it back harder. When she pinned him to the marble floor, gasping, her knees on his chest, she stared into his eyes. "I warned you," she said coldly. "You took a child." "She was just leverage," he hissed. "So was I," Julia whispered. And with one final blow, swift and merciless, she ended him. The moment was still, silent. Then the fire alarms triggered. The flare system had reached its climax. Water poured from the ceilings. Red lights flashed. Outside, the authorities saw the signal. Inside, the nightmare was over. By the time the SWAT teams finally breached the property, the echoes of violence had faded. Smoke curled from shattered windows. Blood streaked the marble floors. The luxury resort was unrecognizable, except for one thing: every hostage was alive. The officers moved quickly, clearing rooms, tending to survivors. They found the little girl curled in Julia's jacket, safe. Her mother sobbed when they reunited. The hotel manager, Carl Simmons, kept repeating one sentence through his tears: "She saved us. That woman saved all of us." But Julia? She was gone. No one saw her leave. No one knew her real name. No one could explain how a woman with no official records, no emergency contact, no trace in any database had dismantled a trained militia with nothing but grit, memory, and pain. All they found was a note, left in the drawer of room 308. It read, "I didn't come here to be a hero. I came here to disappear. But sometimes when the world pushes too far, you remember who you really are. Take care of that little girl. She reminded me what it felt like to protect something again. Don't let the darkness win. MC." Months later, rumors began to spread. A woman with military precision had been seen near a disaster zone in Mexico. A group of traffickers were mysteriously found bound and arrested in a warehouse raid. No footprints, no witnesses, and some believe she was still out there, watching, waiting, protecting those no one else would. Because Julia Crawford or Marissa Kane or whatever name she wore now, she had come back to life in that hotel. Not as a soldier, not as an agent, but as justice itself. And if this story touched something inside you, if you felt your heart racing, if you wondered what you would do in her place, then tell us in the comments below. What would you have done if the world forgot who you were but danger forced you to remember? Your voice matters, and someone out there might be listening.